The story opened with Mr. Seymour Hayworth Somerset receiving a sudden command that he had to raise a young girl. Confusion covered his face as he looked again at the papers in his hand, almost wondering if he had heard wrongly, and needed to check if it was truly real. The large room became quiet for a moment before Seymour finally spoke, saying he did not understand what such a request was supposed to mean. The one behind this strange order was none other than his mother-in-law, the Dowager Duchess Freya Horth, who sat before him with all her usual pride and grace, one hand resting on her cane. In a voice that carried clear sharpness, Duchess Freya asked if what she said was really so hard to understand. Then she repeated herself in a more direct way, almost as if she were spelling it out for him. He was to take in the little girl sitting beside her so quietly and so still, and more than that, he was to give the child the Somerset family name. At the same time, the small girl kept looking on with innocent eyes that shone with quiet hope. Seymour pulled himself together enough to ask his mother-in-law why she had made such a sudden and unusual decision. To him, the sight before him was so odd that it almost felt unreal. A sharp-tongued old duchess and a tiny child, no bigger than a walnut, sitting together like this. In his mind, with dry humor hidden under his thoughts, he admitted that if Freya had not held such a special place in his heart, almost like a true mother, his answer would have sounded very different. He even thought to himself, with silent sarcasm, that if the Somerset house had become so empty and lifeless, then surely bringing in a cat would have made more sense than bringing in a child. The Duchess was clearly offended by the meaning behind his words and quickly accused him of being rude, saying his tone showed that he was not taking her seriously at all. Seymour immediately denied that and tried to explain himself, saying the world was dangerous and that a stranger could not simply be welcomed without question. But Freya was not moved in the slightest. With mocking bitterness, she asked him if he was perhaps eager for her death and ready to claim the rights of her funeral. Then, just as sharply, Duchess Freya changed the direction of the talk and asked whether he still visited Rose's grave, despite all the matters that kept him busy. At once, deep pain crossed Seymour's face. He lifted a hand over his eyes and asked why his late wife had suddenly been brought into this conversation. His mother-in-law reacted at once with anger, accusing him of trying to stop her from even speaking of her own daughter. In that heavy moment, Seymour's memories rose again, and he realized that 1 full year had already passed since the terrible accident. Freya had just asked him how much longer he intended to go on living like this, and she spoke with surprise, saying it had only been a year. But to Seymour, every single day had felt like hell, and it seemed to him as if a whole lifetime had dragged by. Quietly, he admitted to himself that she was right. A full year had passed since his wife, Rose, died in that dreadful carriage accident. Yet even after all that time, the memory of that day stayed sharp in his mind, as if it had only happened yesterday. And he could not imagine how he was ever meant to forget the moment when he lost everyone he called family in one cruel instant. Inside that carriage had been his only brother-in-law, Graham, Graham's wife, and Rose, the woman Seymour loved more than his own life. After that disaster, nothing had been left to him except the crushing weight of the title Duke of Somerset, a title that had originally been meant for his brother-in-law. Nothing remained except that burden, and the one child Graham had left behind. Seymour knew that the title of Duke would be far too heavy for his nephew, who was not even 12 years old yet. Because of that, Seymour had been forced to become the Duke of Somerset in place of his brother-in-law and his young nephew. The pain of that truth could be seen clearly in the cigarette ends crushed inside the ashtray before him. Coming back to the present, his mother-in-law faced him with the truth of the life he was living. She said she knew very well that he hardly slept in his own bed more than a few nights in a month. Then she continued her harsh scolding, saying he had been surviving on nothing but alcohol and cigarettes, living like a man waiting for death, while burying himself under endless work. Seymour begged his mother-in-law not to speak in such a harsh way, while the child was sitting there listening. He tried to defend himself, explaining that the life he was living now was simply the way he had chosen to exist, even if it meant living a short life. He believed the Duchess already understood that very well. But his mother-in-law continued, calmly explaining exactly what was going through his mind. She said he was now focused only on one duty, which was protecting the name and honor of the Somerset family until the day he could return the title to his nephew. She spoke clearly, pointing out the fear he kept hidden inside, the fear that if he ever showed weakness or made even a small mistake, their relatives would rush toward the dukedom like hungry hawks, ready to snatch it away. Seymour could not hold back any longer. Anger suddenly burst out of him as he raised his voice, asking if she realized how many times he had already heard this same speech before. At the same time, he admitted bitterly that everything she had said was correct. His voice trembled with pain as he explained that the moment he tried to give the title to his nephew Dante Graham, people would attack him from every direction. They would question the boy's right to inherit because of his bloodline, since Dante was not actually his son. Seymour continued speaking with sharp frustration. He reminded her that he had entered the Horth family only as the husband of their daughter, and even now he still carried their family name. Yet he had become the Duke of Somerset, a title that originally belonged to the Graham bloodline. Because of that situation, his nephew Dante, the true heir, had ended up becoming almost like a stranger with nothing to his name. So if Seymour ever wanted to pass the dukedom to him without interference from the rest of the Graham relatives, he would have to make a very strong and careful move. Before he could continue further, his mother-in-law suddenly struck her cane sharply against the floor, cutting off his words. She declared that she already understood his fears and intentions very well. She agreed that if the situation he feared ever came true, it would cause a disaster for the entire family. Then she calmly suggested that she had a way to solve the lineage problem that troubled him so much. Seymour looked at her in confusion and surprise, clearly unsure of what she meant. In his mind, he quickly assumed that she was proposing to adopt Dante into the Horth family. Without hesitation, he rejected the idea immediately. He explained firmly that he could never do such a thing, because Dante was the only direct heir of the Graham lineage. But the Duchess quickly scolded him for misunderstanding her words and asked him who said she was even talking about adoption. Then she finally revealed her true plan. She said he should arrange a marriage. According to her idea, he would personally raise the small girl sitting there so she could become a future bride. She explained that when the girl grew older, she would marry Dante, and then Seymour could pass the dukedom to them together. In her mind, that would completely solve the problem. After saying this, the Duchess stepped closer to the child, who smiled brightly with excitement. Freya then asked Seymour what he thought about her plan, clearly believing it was the perfect solution. Seymour could hardly believe what he had just heard. He stared at her in disbelief and said the idea sounded completely ridiculous and made no sense at all. He struggled to even find the right words to explain how shocked he was. In frustration, he covered part of his face with his hand and asked if she was seriously telling him to raise a child only for that purpose. Then he finally asked the first real question that came to his mind. He wanted to know who this child was and where she had come from in the first place. Before the Duchess could answer, the girl spoke for herself. In a bright and cheerful voice, she explained that she came from the Town's End orphanage and that she was 10 years old. With a wide and joyful smile, she proudly introduced herself, saying her name was Luina Whitfield. Luina continued speaking happily and explained that she was actually the one who told Lady Horth that she wanted to become a member of the Somerset family. Seymour's shock only grew stronger. He immediately turned toward his mother-in-law and protested loudly, asking if she had truly brought the girl here simply because she said she wanted that. The Duchess answered calmly and asked him what exactly was stopping them from doing it. That question made Seymour explode with frustration. He insisted there were many reasons why the idea was impossible and argued that it was obvious the child only wanted the wealth of the family. But before he could continue, Luina quickly stood up and interrupted him with surprising enthusiasm. She strongly denied needing any wealth at all. With great confidence, she declared that she had no interest in the Horth name, the Graham family, or even the Somerset title. To prove that she truly meant what she was saying, Luina even offered to sign a contract giving up any rights she might have in the future to the family name or the title. That statement left Seymour completely stunned. Still trying to understand her strange determination, he asked her why she wanted to become part of the family in the first place. Luina answered in a simple and touching way, saying that all she really wanted was to have a family. She gently reminded him that she was an orphan, and as he already knew, she had no family at all. Then she began making small promises to him with excitement shining in her eyes. She told him that if he accepted her, she would always be waiting for him at the door whenever he came home. She added happily that they could eat breakfast together every morning. She even said she could draw a heart using sauce on top of his fried eggs because she was very good at doing that. Hearing this made Seymour quietly repeat the word heart under his breath, clearly confused by the strange conversation. Luina kept talking while slowly walking closer until she sat beside him. She admitted softly that she had gathered every bit of courage she had just to say these things to him. Then she leaned even closer and whispered her final promise. She said she would give him a goodnight kiss every single night. After saying that, she asked him what he thought about everything she had offered. Then she addressed him respectfully by his title, Duke, and told him they could truly become a good family together. This child was Luina Whitfield, nothing more than an ordinary orphan girl from the town's end home, and she had just turned 10 years old. Her name was so common that it was one of the most frequently used names among the children at the orphanage. Other than being a little luckier than the others sometimes, there was nothing particularly special about her. One memory showed Luina walking through a bright green field, filled with joy after she found a rare four-leaf clover. The other children from the orphanage quickly gathered around her. Their faces showed amazement and admiration as they reacted to her ability to find yet another one. Luina held the small plant carefully in her hands, while thinking proudly to herself that she really was lucky, because this was already the 7th clover she had discovered. But behind that cheerful moment, she was hiding a secret much bigger than anyone could imagine. She was not just a normal little girl. In truth, she had been reincarnated into this world as a character from a novel she had once read in her previous life. The story of her memory moved back to only a few days earlier. It had been Thanksgiving Day, when the town's end orphanage was holding its yearly celebration for children who did not know their real birthdays. The orphanage would gather them together so they could share the joy of blowing out candles on a large birthday cake. That day, Luina might have blown the candles a little too hard. Right after doing so, she suddenly felt dizzy and lost her balance, collapsing unconscious in the middle of the celebration. The peaceful party quickly turned into chaos. Frightened voices of children filled the room as they shouted for the teacher, crying that Luina had fallen. While she lay unconscious, her mind drifted through strange thoughts. With bitter humor inside her head, she complained about her terrible luck, and even took back the words she once said about being lucky. After 3 long days and nights of suffering, she finally opened her eyes again. When she woke up, she saw a doctor standing nearby explaining something to the adults around her. The doctor said that if his diagnosis was correct, then there was no real hope for this child to recover. He explained that the best outcome she could hope for was to live only about 5 more years, because there was no cure for the illness she had. In simple terms, he declared that she was terminally ill. Luina could hardly believe what she was hearing. In her mind, she wondered if the doctor had completely lost his senses, because he spoke about her as if she were a poor and pitiful child. She thought about her age and realized she was only 10 years old. If she truly had only 5 years left to live, that meant she would die when she turned 15. A deep feeling of unfairness rose inside her heart. After all, she had always been kind. Whenever she found 2 clovers, she would always give one to the old grandfather who lived at the orphanage. Her sense of injustice grew even stronger when she saw how calmly the teachers accepted the situation, even though she had always shared her food and treated everyone kindly. To her, the whole thing felt cruel and unfair. During the strange dream she experienced while she was unconscious for those 3 days, memories of her previous life slowly returned. In that other life, she had been nothing more than an ordinary student who loved cute things and delicious food. She spent most of her time searching for interesting novels to read. But that normal life ended suddenly when a truck struck her one day. and she died while still very young. Those memories and feelings stayed so clear in her mind that she could even remember the novel she had been reading at that exact moment before her death. The title of the book was Until the Lily Withers. The story of that novel followed a heroine who suffered from a deadly illness, just like the one she now had. As the memory became clearer, Luina suddenly remembered the name of the disease mentioned in the book. It was called the lily disease. In that instant, a frightening realization struck her. The doctor had told her that she also suffered from the same illness, the lily disease. According to the doctor's explanation, once the fever faded, there would not be any obvious symptoms at first, but slowly white spots would begin to spread across the body, and the body would gradually rot until death came. He confirmed that it was a terminal illness, with no known cure. And so, on the very day she had just turned 10 years old, Luina received what sounded like her final diagnosis. At that moment, she understood that what she had experienced was not simply a dream. She had truly been reincarnated into the world of the novel she once read. Even worse, she had not become a main character in the story. She was only an unnamed extra. Despair quickly filled her heart as she wondered why fate had placed her in such a position. Not only was she a background character, but she was also an orphan who was dying from a terrible illness. Still, even in the middle of this miserable situation, one small ray of hope appeared. Luina realized that she actually knew the cure for the lily disease. After all, the illness only existed in the novel, Until the Lily Withers, the same book she had read in her previous life. That story was a typical reverse harem tale where the heroine, beautiful yet sick, like a delicate lily flower, suffered while several men became deeply obsessed with her. In the novel, the heroine who had the same disease began a journey to search for the cure. During that journey, fate led her to meet Seymour, who was one of the male leads in the story. From that moment, her painful struggles truly began. The reason her life became so difficult was because Seymour was actually a hidden villain in the story. He became obsessed with the heroine simply because she reminded him of his late wife. In the end, he did manage to bring the cure to the woman he loved. But there was a serious problem. The cure appeared only at the very beginning of the novel's timeline. That meant the medicine would not exist in the world for another 7 years. And by the time those 7 years passed, Luina would have already been dead for a long time. Realizing this cruel truth made Luina clench her fists in determination. She decided that she would not allow things to continue this way. She refused to die a meaningless and miserable death like the one she experienced in her previous life. Standing in front of a mirror, Luina fell deep into thought as she tried to figure out how she could possibly meet Seymour. He was not just any nobleman. He was a powerful duke, and also the hidden villain of the story. Meanwhile, she was nothing more than a small orphan girl living in a faraway orphanage. The gap between them felt impossibly large. She kept thinking desperately, wondering if there was any possible way to reach him. Just then, the sound of church bells rang outside the orphanage. Suddenly, another girl from the orphanage rushed into the room and called out to Luina with excitement. The girl asked if she was ready to leave, which left Luina confused because she had no idea what she meant. The girl laughed and teased her, saying Luina must still be absent-minded because of her illness. Then she reminded her that today was the day the children would be volunteering at the mansion of one of the orphanage's wealthy patrons. Hearing this made Luina remember that the plan had been mentioned earlier during a meeting. The girl hurried her along and told her to get ready quickly. She also warned her to behave very carefully, because today they would be meeting Lady Horth. The moment Luina heard the name Horth, she suddenly froze. The name sounded extremely familiar. As she searched through her memories from the novel, she quickly realized something important. Lady Horth was actually Seymour's mother-in-law, and she was the only person capable of controlling his pride and arrogance. In fact, she was almost like a true mother to him. At that moment, excitement sparked inside Luina's mind. She wondered how she could have overlooked such an easy path to reach Seymour. Lady Horth, the widow of the late Marquise, held absolute authority in the Horth household. However, after losing her only daughter, Rose Horth, she had become known as a strange and intimidating figure. Among the orphanage children, She was famous for the cold and gloomy aura that surrounded her. She would sharply criticize even the smallest details she noticed, such as a child wiping their nose or another child wearing clothes with mismatched buttons. Luina also remembered more details from the novel. Lady Horth was someone who valued perfection above everything else. Her son-in-law was Seymour Graham himself, the second son of the Duke of Somerset. When he was still young, the Horth family had taken him in and raised him to become their daughter's husband. Because of that, he became known as Seymour Horth. Later, after the sudden death of the Duke of Somerset, Seymour inherited the title and became the new Duke of Somerset. At the same time, he remained the son-in-law of the Horth family, which meant he had effectively become the head of both families at once. Even though his marriage had been arranged for political reasons, Seymour loved Rose more than anyone else in the world. And Lady Horth was not only his mother-in-law, but also the closest thing he had to a mother, the only person who truly shared the deep pain of losing Rose. Hearing and remembering all this made Luina's face brighten with hope. Lady Horth was the main patron of the town's End orphanage. That meant, if everything went well, there was a chance she might eventually meet Seymour through her. But Luina quickly calmed herself, realizing that simply meeting Lady Horth did not guarantee that she would ever meet the Duke. Still, she tried to stay positive. After all, she had always been lucky when it came to finding four-leaf clovers. Even remembering her previous life could be seen as a stroke of luck. So she gathered her courage and decided to push forward with her plan to save her own life. However, only a few hours later, she found herself in a very difficult situation, wondering in despair what she should do. It felt as if she would not even get the chance to begin. She had believed everything would go smoothly, but things quickly turned the opposite way. One of the orphanage children suddenly sneezed loudly near Lady Horth, and the sound immediately caught the lady's attention in a way that clearly displeased her. Luina felt her heart sink. It seemed like her plan had failed before she had even spoken a single word. A cold and strict expression appeared on Lady Horth's face, and the child who had sneezed began shaking with fear. Luina wondered nervously what she should do now. To make matters worse, the day she had chosen happened to be the very day Lady Horth was hosting a special gathering, a tea party for several noble ladies. Luina had hoped to use this opportunity to at least start a conversation with her. But Martin's sneeze had ruined everything, and she wondered if this would be the end of her plan, before it had even begun. Meanwhile, one of the teachers began scolding Martin very harshly. She demanded that he apologize immediately to the lady for his rude behavior. The boy tried to speak, stammering nervously as he apologized, but the teacher ordered him to stop stuttering and speak properly, which only made the poor child burst into tears. At that moment, Lady Horth suddenly raised her voice and said that was enough. She added that watching the child cry like that was irritating her. Then she calmly instructed her servant Henry to take the boy away and help calm him down. The noble ladies attending the tea party quietly admired Lady Horth's unexpected generosity. Normally, she was extremely strict when it came to etiquette. They even commented that perhaps it would be better not to bring children who suffered from pollen allergies to events like this again. While all this was happening, Luina watched in confusion and began thinking carefully about the situation. She wondered why Lady Horth had shown such unusual kindness. Then a thought suddenly crossed her mind. Maybe, if she handled this moment wisely, she could find a way to speak with the Duchess alone. Just then, one of the noble ladies suggested that everyone take a walk through the mansion's beautiful spring garden and bring the children along with them. Another lady quickly agreed and pointed out that their numbers were perfect for walking in pairs. Hearing this made Luina realize that this might be her chance. Taking advantage of the moment, Luina stepped forward boldly toward Lady Horth. She introduced herself politely as Luina Whitfield and asked the Duchess to allow her to learn elegance and sophistication from her. Lady Horth immediately recognized her as the child who had been glancing toward her repeatedly during the entire event. In her mind, she noted that it had been a long time since she had seen a child who did not seem afraid of her presence. Even though she had not planned to join the walk herself, she agreed to Luina's request. She calmly said that she saw no reason to refuse if the child truly wished it. She then invited Luina to walk with her along the garden path that had been prepared for the guests. But to everyone's surprise, Luina firmly refused. She declared clearly that she had no interest in walking at all. Her words caused shock and confusion among the people standing nearby. One of the teachers quickly rushed forward and began apologizing, assuming the child must have misunderstood something. The teacher also scolded Luina for what she had just said, but Luina ignored them completely. She continued speaking directly to Lady Horth, expressing how much she admired the Duchess's elegant way of speaking. Then she politely offered to read books for her, while learning that refined accent from her. Luina's bold request impressed Lady Horth. The Duchess thought to herself how unusual it was that this child, instead of trembling with fear, like the others, spoke to her with such confidence and demanded what she wanted openly. After a brief pause, Lady Horth agreed to the request. She called for her servant Henry and ordered him to prepare a quiet place inside the mansion where they could sit and read together. Hearing this made Luina secretly overjoyed because it meant she had successfully managed to be alone with the Dowager Marchioness. In her mind, she felt that things might turn out easier than she had first imagined. Once they were alone in the room, Lady Horth took the initiative and asked the girl for her name again. But then her expression grew serious as she looked directly at Luina and asked the true reason behind this little trick. The sudden question confused Luina for a moment. Lady Horth continued speaking calmly but firmly, saying she was well aware that the girl had not asked to come inside simply to read a book. She told her clearly not to play games with her. At that moment, Luina understood that the Duchess had already seen through her intentions. Before Lady Horth could press her further, Luina quickly spoke up and asked a surprising question. She mentioned that she also suffered from pollen allergies, just like the boy Martin. A puzzled look appeared on Lady Horth's face. Seeing that reaction, Luina continued explaining that the flower garden outside was actually not comfortable for her at all. She revealed that she had noticed Lady Horth give a small sneeze when Martin sneezed earlier. Luina added that she believed the Duchess had shown mercy to Martin because he suffered from the same allergy. In her mind, she quietly remembered something the old doctor at the orphanage always said, that the noses and throats of adults grow weaker as they age. Lady Horth looked at her with curiosity and asked if she had noticed that from the very beginning and had been watching her the whole time because of it. Luina quickly denied that idea and politely asked if she could speak honestly. Lady Horth nodded slightly and agreed to listen. Gathering her courage, Luina explained that she had a request to make, and that was the real reason she wanted to be alone with her. Lady Horth responded with a cold tone, wondering what kind of request such a small child could possibly want from her. Luina gave a nervous smile and quietly confirmed that she truly did have something to ask. But before she could say anything more, Lady Horth immediately refused. She spoke sharply, saying she was surprised that such a tiny child would drag her inside the mansion just to ask for a favor. Then she warned Luina that if she believed the Duchess would be gentle with her, simply because she was a child, she was completely mistaken. The sudden rejection shocked Luina deeply. Lady Horth reached for the small bell on the table and rang it to summon her servant. When Henry appeared, she ordered him to call the teacher and remove the child from the room at once. Panic filled Luina's chest. She realized she was about to be sent away before she had even managed to say the first letter of Seymour's name. As the servant approached, Luina quickly gathered all the courage she had left. She knew she had worked too hard to let the chance disappear like this. Suddenly, she struck her hands on the table and raised her voice, calling Lady Horth by her full title. Then she finally revealed her real request. She said she wanted permission to kiss the Duchess on the cheek before she left in front of the carriage. She added that she understood Lady Horth was not someone easy to persuade, but if she refused, Luina would simply find another plan. She explained honestly that whenever she walked through the village streets, she often felt jealous seeing children kiss adults on the cheek. Luina continued speaking with touching sincerity. She said that as an orphan, she had no adult who would allow her to do such a thing, and she had always wondered what that feeling would be like. That was why she had asked for the chance if the opportunity appeared. She even admitted that she was willing to use every trick she could think of just to achieve that small wish. As she listened, Lady Horth's expression slowly softened. deep inside, she wondered if this child had truly gone through so much effort just to ask for something so simple. Most of the people who visited her usually came with hidden goals, seeking business investments or personal advantages. Many believed she had become an easy target after losing both her husband and her daughter. Yet this little girl asked for nothing but a simple kiss on the cheek. The strange request reminded her of her late daughter Rose when she was young. Without realizing it, Lady Horth found her thoughts drifting back to memories of Rose. After a moment, she regained her calm expression and told Luina that she understood her feelings. Since the request was not difficult, she would grant it. Later, when Luina left the mansion, the teacher was already waiting for her beside the carriage. So Luina leaned forward and kissed Lady Horth gently on the cheek. Before leaving, she promised that she would come to visit her again someday, and the lady welcomed that promise warmly. The moment shocked everyone who witnessed it. The teachers and the children stared in disbelief. None of them had ever imagined that a child would dare kiss the Dowager Marchioness on the cheek like that. As the carriage finally began to move away from the mansion, Luina kept waving happily toward Lady Horth. After Luina left, Lady Horth quietly called her servant Henry. She calmly ordered him to ask the chef to start looking for dessert recipes that children might enjoy. Meanwhile, on the road back to the orphanage, Luina was happily telling her friend about everything that had happened, smiling widely the entire time. The next morning at the orphanage, Martin, the boy who had sneezed during the tea party, surprised Luina by bringing her a small gift. The present was a simple tangerine fruit. He handed it to her shyly while thanking her for what she had done the previous day. Because of her actions at the tea party, everything had gone smoothly and no one had gotten angry. One of the girls nearby commented with admiration that Luina had been amazing, especially when she kissed the lady on the cheek. Even the orphanage director seemed surprised by the story. But Luina quickly played down the whole event and felt a little guilty inside because the truth was she had only done it to push forward with her plan. Suddenly, another girl appeared with an annoyed expression. She angrily asked why everyone was making such a big deal over a simple kiss, while she scolded the other children and ordered them to return to cleaning. Later in the kitchen, another girl was complaining loudly that Luina had been given an extra egg during breakfast, which she believed was unfair special treatment. But another girl answered calmly that perhaps people were trying to treat Luina better, because they thought she might someday become part of the Horth family. The first girl quickly rejected the idea, saying that someone like Luina, the most ordinary child in the entire orphanage, could never join a noble family like the Horths. Meanwhile, Luina simply enjoyed eating her tangerine, completely ignoring their gossip. The jealous girl kept talking, saying old people were always strange, and that Lady Horth would probably have been just as happy if she had been the one who kissed her. Hearing all this made Luina realize something important. Since the tea party, her reputation inside the orphanage had clearly changed. Everyone's attention had started focusing on her, which also meant jealous people were beginning to see her as a problem. Turning calmly toward the jealous girl, Luina simply suggested that she should try kissing the lady herself the next time they visited. That simple suggestion made the girl furious and caused her to start stammering with anger. Before the argument could continue, a teacher who had been looking for Luina suddenly appeared and interrupted them. She told Luina to quickly prepare herself because she needed to leave. When Luina asked where she was supposed to go, the teacher answered that Lady Horth had sent a carriage to bring her back to the mansion. Both Luina and the jealous girl froze in shock at the news. Inside her mind, Luina wondered in amazement if this meant her charm had actually worked on Lady Horth. A wave of excitement rushed through her, and she decided that it was time to use her charm strategy with full strength. Later that evening, Luina found herself sitting quietly in the drawing room of the Horth mansion. She thought proudly that it had been very clever of her to prepare what she called her magic trio set, in case something unexpected happened. But as time passed, her waiting began to feel longer and longer. She started growing nervous as she noticed servants constantly entering and leaving the room since the moment she arrived. Suddenly, the servant Henry entered the room with a troubled expression. He apologized politely and told her that she would have to leave the mansion today. Luina immediately refused to go. She insisted that she could not leave before meeting Lady Horth because she had something important to say. She added that she had even prepared her magic trio set to show her. While she was arguing, Luina overheard Henry speaking quietly with one of the maids nearby. He mentioned that the situation was serious and that Lady Horth's condition had become worse since that morning. Luina also heard him asking whether the doctor who had been traveling had arrived yet. The maid answered that she had just received a message saying the doctor had only just left on his way. Hearing this, maid, Luina froze in shock as she wondered what exactly was happening. Anxiety quickly filled her chest as she hid quietly and watched the servants moving around nervously. She wondered if something terrible had happened to Lady Horth. At the same time, another fear appeared in her mind. What if she lost this chance to see her? She had no idea when another opportunity like this would come again. Because of that, she decided she could not give up so easily. Determined, she quietly followed the servants to find out what was going on. As she listened carefully, she heard one of the maids explaining that the lady had briefly woken up but had quickly fallen asleep again. The maid said Lady Horth was still complaining about nausea and that she was sweating heavily. She added that the lady had never collapsed like this before, and no one knew what they should do. Another maid spoke with worry, wondering what would happen to the Horth family if something serious happened to Lady Horth. But the servant Henry quickly scolded her and told her not to speak such foolish words. He ordered her to bring warm water so they could wipe the lady's sweat. When Luina realized that Lady Horth was ill, she made a quick decision and headed toward her room. She quietly slipped inside before anyone returned. As she entered, she remembered something from the original novel. In the story, Lady Horth had already died and only appeared in Seymour's memories. He would sometimes say, "If Lady Horth were alive in times like this." But the events of that novel began 7 years later, so Luina had believed the lady would be safe for now. Still, seeing this situation made her wonder if this illness might actually be the reason Lady Horth died. She carefully observed the symptoms: sleepiness, cold sweat, and no clear external injury. Suddenly, a thought struck her. These symptoms looked very familiar. Just then, the servant Henry walked into the room and saw her standing there. He looked surprised and asked how she'd managed to get inside. Then he told her she needed to leave because the lady required rest. But Luina ignored his words and spoke loudly, telling him to bring sugar water immediately. She repeated her request firmly, insisting it must be brought right away. After some time passed, Lady Horth slowly woke up and found herself lying in her room. She noticed Luina sitting beside her and asked how she had entered. Luina simply told her that she had woken up earlier. Then she explained that Lady Horth had fainted because of low blood sugar, so she had prepared sugar water for her. Lady Horth asked if she had stayed there the whole time waiting for her to wake up. Luina nodded and admitted that the butler had told her to leave, but she had been very worried, so she stayed anyway. She politely apologized for doing so. Luina continued explaining that when she saw the symptoms, they reminded her of something the old doctor at the orphanage had once taught her about low blood sugar. Because of that, she could not simply stand there doing nothing. She added that she believed the emergency treatment she learned might help the lady recover. Once again, she apologized for remaining in the room without permission. Luina also mentioned that the doctor had once explained that this condition was not very serious as long as it was managed properly. Hearing all this made Lady Horth smile softly. In her mind, she thought about how this girl had helped her again today. Then she noticed something else. The bed around her was covered with small flowers made from fabric. Curious, she asked Luina where those flowers came from. Luina explained that the servant had brought her a set of fabric pieces earlier, so she made the flowers while waiting for the lady to wake up. Lady Horth looked closely at the flowers and suddenly remembered something from the past. When her daughter Rose was young, they used to make many flowers like these together. She never thought she would see them again. A gentle smile appeared on her face as she thanked Luina, telling her that thanks to her actions, the emergency had passed. Luina laughed modestly in response. As Lady Horth watched her, she began thinking that this girl was truly rare, a child with both kindness and good manners. Because of that, Lady Horth decided she should reward Luina for what she had done. She explained to her that even though Seymour was officially the head of the Horth family, She was the one who actually managed the internal affairs of the household. This meant that all the Horth properties were under her control. Then she told Luina that she wished to give her a reward that matched the risk she had taken to save her life. She asked if the girl had thought about what she might want. Then, quite suddenly, Lady Horth made an unexpected offer. She asked Luina if she would like to become a member of the Horth family. The words completely shocked Luina. Lady Horth assured her that she would never bring shame to the Horth name and asked her if she would accept the offer. She even added that if Luina joined the family, she would enjoy delicious meals every day and wear many beautiful clothes. Hearing this made Luina's eyes shine with excitement. She wondered if that meant she would be able to eat delicious cake every day and would never have to share her clothes with the other children again. In her mind, Luina realized that Lady Horth's offer was truly amazing, especially when she remembered how their first meeting had happened. But even though she felt deeply grateful, she still told the lady that accepting the offer might be a little difficult because it was not exactly what she had originally wanted. Lady Horth looked surprised by her answer and asked her what she meant when she said it would be difficult. Then Luina finally revealed her real goal. She explained that what she truly wanted was not to join Lady Horth's household, but to become a child under the guardianship of the Duke of Somerset himself. Lady Horth told her that joining the Horth family would be a much better choice for her. But Luina gently replied that she had heard the maids talking. They said that Duke Seymour had been going through a very difficult time ever since he lost his family. She added that she also knew Lady Horth worried deeply about him. Luina continued explaining that the Duke, besides being the head of the Somerset family, also had to handle many matters related to the Horth family. Because of this heavy responsibility, there were people around him who were secretly trying to take the Duke's title away from him. In the worst possible situation, he might not even be able to pass the title to his nephew. If that happened, it would leave him with a terrible feeling of guilt. And watching Lady Horth feel sad and worried about him made Luina's heart hurt. Luina went on to present the plan she had carefully thought about. She said she had wondered many times about what she could possibly do to reduce their worries. Since the nephew who would inherit the title had a different family name, she believed that if she became Seymour's ward and later married the nephew, it would create a clear reason and proper legitimacy for the title to be passed on. She admitted honestly that she did not really know what kind of person the nephew was. But to her, that part did not matter very much. Either way, if she married him, she would still become part of their family. And most importantly, the sleepless nights Lady Horth spent worrying about the Duke might finally disappear. Luina said she would already feel satisfied if she could ease their worries even a little. Hearing these words deeply moved Lady Horth. She reached forward and gently held Luina's hand, saying that the girl was far more thoughtful and wise than she had expected. Lady Horth told her that she clearly understood her intentions and believed she would be strong enough to face any rumors that might spread because of her background. However, she placed one condition on her. If Luina truly wished to become Seymour's ward on the condition that she would later marry his nephew, there was something she would have to do first. At that point, the events returned to the present moment, where Luina stood in front of Seymour. She smiled brightly and told him that the three of them could become a truly good family together. Seymour looked completely confused. He admitted that he did not understand what she was talking about, and that he had no idea how she had managed to win the favor of his mother-in-law. But he warned her firmly that if she was aiming for the position of heir, that idea was absolutely unacceptable. Luina quickly shook her head and denied that accusation. To prove her honesty, she showed him a written agreement she had signed with Lady Horth. In the document, she promised that she would never try to claim the position of heir. Seymour looked surprised when he saw the agreement. Before he could say anything else, his mother-in-law interrupted him. She calmly told him to raise the girl first, and then they could discuss the rest later. She also expressed her disappointment in him, saying she was surprised that someone still so young could already be so stubborn and inflexible. Seymour raised his voice in frustration and demanded to know how he was supposed to raise a child. Lady Horth answered calmly that she was not asking him to care for a baby. She explained that raising a child her age would not be difficult at all. She also made it clear that she was not asking him to personally look after the girl every moment. After all, Children of that age could easily grow up well with the help of a private tutor. Seymour looked at her with disbelief and asked if she was truly serious about this idea, because to him the entire matter sounded completely ridiculous. At that moment, Luina stepped forward and spoke again. She apologized politely to the Duke, explaining that she had been stubborn and had insisted strongly on becoming a ward of the Somerset family. She added that Lady Horth had kindly accepted her request, even though she had been the one pushing for it. Luina then revealed something important. Lady Horth had originally offered to adopt her into the Horth family instead. But as an orphan who had never truly received love from anyone, Luina believed she understood people's feelings very well. She told Seymour that she had noticed how Lady Horth always thought about him first, worried about him constantly, and cared for him more than anyone else. Because of that, Luina said she simply wanted to ease Lady Horth's worries, even if it was only a little. She continued explaining that she did not want to become just a name inside a family record. She wanted to become part of a real family where people shared their hearts with one another. She promised him that she had no secret ambitions. All she wanted was to be someone he would occasionally check on, someone he might worry about just a little from time to time. For her, that would already be enough. Then she looked at him sadly and asked in a quiet voice if even that small wish was impossible. At that moment, Seymour found himself thinking with surprise about how a child who was barely 10 years old could understand their situation so clearly. He knew very well that she must also realize that joining his mother-in-law's family would have been the easier choice. Yet she insisted on becoming his ward and even wrote an agreement to prove it. All of that simply because she wanted to become a real part of their family and ease their burdens. After thinking for a long moment, Seymour finally reached out, took the agreement, and decided to read it carefully. Luina called him politely by his title, Duke. He answered with a short yes. Then she told him enthusiastically that he could read the document as many times as he wanted. As Seymour looked at her, he noticed something strange. She was extremely calm, far calmer than what he would expect from a child her age. The calmness reminded him of someone else. Yes, just like that other child, his nephew. Later that night at Seymour's residence, Luina lay in her new bed, feeling very happy as she thought about everything that had happened. Things had gone even better than she had expected. She had not even dared to hope that they would allow her to stay in the Duke's mansion while the documents were being reviewed. All of this had only been possible because Lady Horth had stood firmly on her side. Now her only task was to slowly grow closer to Seymour and eventually obtain the medicine. The thought filled her with excitement, and she jumped happily on the bed, realizing that she had managed to survive for now. But suddenly she sat up straight after remembering something she had nearly forgotten. She looked surprised when she noticed the maid, Eerie, still awake in the room. The maid asked gently if Luina was having trouble sleeping. Instead of answering, Luina asked her if she knew where the Duke's room was located. Eerie looked surprised by such a question at this late hour. Luina simply smiled and explained that she had made a promise to the Duke. At the same time, in another room, a servant was reading a report to Seymour. The servant mentioned that today had been Lady Luina's first day in the mansion and asked if the Duke wished to check whether her sleeping arrangements were comfortable. Seymour replied coldly that there was no need for that. The child could simply sleep. But his assistant, Axel Portman, spoke up with a teasing tone. He pointed out that despite Seymour's words, he had given the girl the brightest room in the entire mansion. Axel wondered out loud if the Duke actually cared about the little lady. Axel continued jokingly, saying that the girl seemed to like him much more than expected, and if things continued like this, he might even end up making her his adopted daughter. Suddenly, Seymour stood up from his chair. Axel asked him where he was going at such a late hour. Seymour answered that his mother-in-law had asked him to remain at the mansion on the child's first day, so he had stayed in the office finishing some necessary work. But now that midnight had already passed, he could continue his work somewhere else. Axel quickly criticized that explanation, saying the logic made no sense. Just as Seymour reached for the door handle, he suddenly heard a cheerful voice from the other side saying, "Oh, you opened it first." He immediately recognized the voice. When the door opened, Luina was standing there in her nightgown. She proudly announced that she had come to give him a goodnight kiss. Seymour looked confused and repeated her words, asking, "A goodnight kiss?" Luina nodded happily and explained that she had promised him earlier. If he took her in, she would give him a goodnight kiss every night. Seymour refused at once, saying he did not need such a thing and that he still had work to finish. But Luina strongly objected. She insisted that he could not continue working so late at night. Adults needed to sleep properly, or their health would become worse. She grabbed his hand and declared that she could not allow him to keep working like that. Then she asked him to come with her and offered to read him a book instead. Pulling his hand, she urged him to hurry. In his mind, Seymour sighed and thought that he had no choice but to play along with her for a short while before returning to his work. Inside the bedroom, Luina sat beside him and began reading a story aloud. She read, and finally the prince found the dragon sleeping deep inside the forest. She continued reading that the prince thought to himself that if the dragon woke up, the village would fall into danger once again. But when he looked at the dragon closely, it seemed kinder than he had expected. Listening to the story made Seymour think quietly that this strange situation was starting to drive him crazy. Meanwhile, Luina kept reading. After thinking for a moment, the prince decided to take out his cloak instead of his sword. Seymour found himself thinking again. She had said she learned to read aloud at the orphanage, but her voice was unusually clear and steady. And with that, she continued reading the story. The prince gently covered the dragon with his cloak, and at that very moment a fairy appeared from behind a nearby tree. The fairy began speaking to the prince, explaining that the dragon had been cursed to sleep forever. She told him that the only way to wake the dragon was through the touch of someone with a warm and kind heart. According to the fairy, the prince had already broken the curse and awakened the poor dragon. As Seymour listened quietly to the story, his mind drifted into deeper thoughts. He wondered to himself if the dragon had truly wanted to wake up. Would it not have been better for the dragon to remain asleep forever? He thought about how often this same question had crossed his mind ever since the accident happened. Sometimes he even wondered if the dragon might resent the prince for waking him from that endless sleep. But today, something felt different. Those dark thoughts that usually followed him everywhere did not seem to trouble him. Perhaps it was because Luina's voice sounded strangely bright and gentle while she read the story. Even though he believed the whole situation was unnecessary, he eventually gave in to sleep. The next morning, one of the maids entered Seymour's room quietly. She assumed that he must have drunk too much alcohol again the previous night. Ever since his wife died, he had relied on alcohol to fall asleep, and she expected to find several empty bottles around the room. But this time she was surprised to see a storybook resting beside his bed. She wondered in confusion why such a book would be there. Her shock only grew stronger when she saw Seymour sleeping peacefully and Luina sleeping beside him. Later that morning, Seymour slowly woke up to the bright sunlight streaming into the room and the gentle sounds of birds outside. He realized he had slept deeply without suffering from the usual headache or the unpleasant effects of alcohol. His servant rushed into the room, almost crying with emotion. The servant expressed how surprised he was that his master had slept through the night without touching even a single drop of alcohol. He declared that this miracle must surely be thanks to Lady Luina. Seymour frowned and asked angrily why no one had woken him earlier. Then he demanded to know where that troublesome child was. The servant answered that she was currently eating breakfast and even suggested that the Duke join her for the meal. But Seymour firmly rejected the idea. Meanwhile, in the dining hall, Luina was happily enjoying a luxurious breakfast unlike anything she had ever seen during her life at the orphanage. The chef stood nearby and told her with a smile that he was glad she liked the food and encouraged her to eat as much as she wanted. As Luina continued eating, she thought happily about the previous night. She had fallen asleep beside the Duke without even noticing it. She felt relieved that he had not gotten angry about it. Still, she secretly wished they could have eaten breakfast together. It made her a little sad that he had already left for work. Even so, she believed she might have gained a little of his favor because of what happened. That meant she was slowly getting closer to obtaining the cure she needed. Her peaceful breakfast was suddenly interrupted when a messenger arrived carrying a letter from the Dowager Countess Horth. After finishing her meal, the messenger named Hugo handed the letter to her. Luina opened it and saw that it began with the words, "Dear Luina." In the letter, Lady Horth asked how her first day at the Somerset mansion had gone and told her to report honestly if that ill-tempered man had caused her any trouble. Reading this made Luina quietly reply in her mind that he had not bothered her at all. In fact, they had simply slept peacefully in the same room. The letter continued with Lady Horth writing that she would visit the mansion in a few days. She encouraged Luina to eat well and sleep properly until she could see her healthy face again. Those words made Luina very happy, because she imagined she might even receive praise for helping the Duke sleep peacefully. But her happiness quickly turned into surprise when she read the final note written at the end of the letter. It said, "The child you wish to meet will also come." Luina froze for a moment and wondered if Lady Horth was referring to Dante Graham, Seymour's nephew, and the true heir of the Somerset title. A few days later, the long-awaited day of Lady Horth's visit finally arrived. When Luina met her again, she suddenly thought it felt strange that she had originally approached her only because she wanted to survive. Lady Horth asked gently if she had been doing well. Luina answered enthusiastically, but quietly wondered inside why she felt so emotional and happy to see the lady again. She questioned herself, wondering if these feelings were simply the result of getting used to this life while she searched for the cure. Still, she began chatting excitedly with Lady Horth, telling her about the delicious meals, the comfortable bed, and the beautiful clothes she had been wearing every day. She admitted that she was talking so much simply because she was happy to see her again. Then she proudly added that she had even managed to make Duke Seymour sleep early one night by reading a fairy tale beside him. Hearing this surprised Lady Horth greatly, and she described what Luina had done as something truly incredible. Lady Horth continued speaking, explaining that what Luina had done was truly impressive. After all, it was the first time Seymour had managed to sleep peacefully while someone else was present beside him. Then Lady Horth told Luina that, just as she had written in her letter, she had brought that child with her today. Luina immediately realized that her guess had been correct. Lady Horth called for the boy to come forward, and while she did so, Luina thought quietly to herself that today she was finally going to meet him. The boy who might one day become her future husband. The boy standing in front of them was Dante Graham. Before Luina even fully understood how it happened, she suddenly found herself sitting alone with Dante in a room filled with sweets and desserts. She wondered in confusion how they had ended up alone together like this. Lady Horth had simply told them to stay and talk so they could get to know each other better, while she went to check whether Seymour had once again neglected the affairs of the household. Hearing that had secretly made Luina hope that the lady would come back as soon as possible. Luina tried to gather her courage. She reminded herself that this meeting was the very reason she had come here in the first place. If she failed to build a connection with Dante, she would have no choice but to return to the orphanage. And if that happened, she would continue suffering from the terrible illness until the day she died. That outcome was something she absolutely could not allow. Because of that, she knew she had to get closer to him no matter what. But the deep frown on Dante's face was already making her feel nervous. Then a small idea suddenly came to her mind. Cake. Everyone loves cake. Trying to act friendly, she called him by his name and offered him a piece. She pointed out that the head chef of the mansion made wonderful desserts and that she was sure he would like them. However, Dante responded coldly. He warned her not to start thinking that this place was her home, because in the end, he was the one who would inherit the family title. Luina was shocked by his harsh response. She quickly tried to explain that he had misunderstood her intentions. But before she could finish, Dante interrupted her and told her to forget it. He said he had no interest in hearing her excuses, because the adults had forced them into this strange arrangement anyway. After saying that, he stood up and walked toward the door. Luina felt completely stunned. She wondered if he believed that she had come here to steal his position as heir. She quickly decided that she needed to catch up with him and clear up this misunderstanding. But Dante moved quickly and disappeared before she could stop him. She looked around in confusion and wondered if he had already run away from the mansion entirely. Feeling lost, she realized that she still did not know the layout of the huge palace. She wished there was some high place where she could see everything at once. Suddenly, she remembered the enormous tree in the garden. Since it was the tallest tree on the entire property, she thought she might be able to find Dante if she climbed it. She quickly decided to sneak there and return before anyone noticed she was gone. After all, she had not been the tree-climbing champion at the orphanage for nothing. When she finally reached the top of the tree, she looked around in amazement. The height of the tree allowed her to see just how enormous the Duke's estate truly was. Compared to the small orphanage, this place was on a completely different level. But she quickly shook her head and reminded herself that this was not the time to admire the scenery. If she failed to find Dante now, her first impression with him would be ruined forever. She carefully searched the garden from above. Soon she spotted him sitting alone in a quiet corner. Since he had not gone very far, she thought she could quickly climb down and speak to him. She wanted to explain clearly that she had no interest in the heir's position. But just as she prepared to move, she suddenly heard voices nearby. Looking down, she saw two men walking through the garden. One of them looked like Duke Seymour. She noticed that Dante had not seen them yet. Then she saw that the Duke was walking directly toward Dante's location. Luina suddenly remembered how strict the orphanage rules had been. Whenever children wandered around without permission, they would be scolded. If she left things like this, the Duke and Dante would soon run into each other, and Dante would be caught sneaking around when he should have been with Lady Horth. Realizing this, Luina decided she had to get their attention immediately. Without thinking any further, she shouted from the top of the tree, calling out to Duke Seymour. Dante stopped walking the moment he heard the voice coming from above. He looked around in confusion, wondering where the sound had come from. Meanwhile, Luina happily waved down at the Duke from the tree branches. She greeted him cheerfully and expressed surprise that he had returned home so early. Then she casually offered to help prepare tea or go for a walk in the garden. Seymour looked up at her in complete disbelief and asked why she was sitting up in a tree. Luina answered brightly that she had simply been playing hide-and-seek with Dante. Luina felt a wave of relief wash over her because she had successfully drawn Seymour's attention and avoided that awkward moment. However, the man standing beside Seymour looked completely fascinated. He kept staring at her with great admiration. The man quietly muttered in amazement, praising Luina's appearance in a way that left her totally confused. He continued speaking excitedly, saying that she was not overly aristocratic, yet she was not rustic either. Instead, she looked like a truly beautiful young maiden. Then, with great enthusiasm, he suddenly declared that she would become his model. Those words only made Luina even more confused than before. A few hours earlier, before this strange meeting happened, Seymour had been sitting in his office writing a letter when he learned that Lady Horth had arrived at the Duke's residence. He quickly concluded that she had not come to see him personally. If that had been her intention, she would have visited the office instead. It was clear that she had come to see that child instead. His assistant Axel confirmed this guess, adding that the two of them seemed to be getting along very well. Axel continued speaking, mentioning that the servants could not stop praising the girl. They said she was extremely friendly and approached people very easily. Seymour quietly thought to himself that the child really was overly friendly. He remembered how she had suddenly appeared before him a few days earlier. She had rushed into his room excitedly while holding a new book. With bright enthusiasm, she had told him that she would read that book to him that day, and had even changed the type of story so that he would not get bored. Seymour's face had shown clear confusion at that moment. Since that day, she had started coming to his room every evening after he finished his work. She would sit beside him and read fairy tales aloud until he eventually fell asleep. This happened again and again, until her visits became part of his daily routine. On another day, while Seymour was busy working in his office, Axel informed him that the carriage from the mansion had arrived to take him home. Seymour immediately replied that he had already told them he would not be returning to the palace that day. But Axel calmly answered that Lady Luina had personally sent the carriage and insisted that he finish work on time. It did not stop with that one incident. She continued preventing him from working overtime, and before he realized it, he had started leaving work at the same hour every day. Even after returning to the mansion, his evenings were spent listening to the fairy tales she read to him until he drifted off to sleep. As if that were not enough, she stubbornly insisted that they eat breakfast together every morning as well. Each morning she would stand there to say goodbye as he left for work and would ask him to return home early. Seymour would glance at her briefly before leaving and quietly mutter his agreement. Later, while sitting in his office, Seymour told himself that he had only allowed her presence because he could not ignore his mother-in-law's constant pressure. Still, since the child arrived, he had noticed that his physical condition had improved slightly. Axel suddenly interrupted his thoughts by pointing out that the servants all seemed happier these days. Their faces were full of smiles, and it looked like they had warmly welcomed the little lady. Axel continued speaking enthusiastically, while pointing out that Seymour's skin looked healthier and that his work efficiency had improved greatly. Axel added that he had not seen his master this free from worry in a very long time. But Seymour quickly ordered him to stop talking and leave the room. As Axel walked away, he quietly muttered that he had only been speaking honestly. Just then, Derek, the head of the brand planning department, entered the office with a nervous expression. Seymour immediately asked him if something was wrong. Derek explained that the child model who was supposed to represent their children's clothing line had contacted them with bad news. The boy had suffered an injury that left a scar on his face, so he would no longer be able to continue his activities as a model. Derek explained that they would now have to find a new model as soon as possible. Hearing this, Seymour removed his glasses with a tired expression and agreed that a replacement would have to be found. However, Derek pointed out that the situation would not be simple. The photo shoot had already been scheduled for the very next day, and everyone clearly remembered how difficult it had been to find the first model. Seymour's company mainly operated as a commercial distribution business. The reason a company like his had suddenly decided to launch a clothing brand was because they had recently imported a large batch of naturally dyed cotton fabrics that needed to be distributed. This opportunity matched perfectly with a new trend that had started spreading among high society. Many noble ladies had begun showing interest in a simpler and more rustic lifestyle. Instead of wearing shiny silk and expensive jewelry, they were now searching for natural and comfortable styles. Seymour had decided to take advantage of this trend. For the marketing campaign, he had hired a famous commercial artist named Auber. At that time, Auber was considered one of the most well-known artists among the nobility and an essential talent when it came to promoting luxury brands. However, the real problem was Auber's unpredictable temper. The artist suddenly exploded with anger, shouting loudly that this was not the feeling he was searching for at all. Auber was well known for his difficult personality and his habit of refusing to work if he did not like the model presented to him. He continued shouting while explaining what he truly wanted. According to him, the model had to look healthy and pure, elegant, but still humble. He said he wanted a child who resembled a wildflower growing freely in nature, not someone who looked like an expensive bouquet of roses placed on display. The scene shifted back to Seymour's office, where his assistants sat in despair, wondering where they could possibly find a child who matched such strange requirements. Axel remained silent for a moment before hesitantly suggesting that there might already be a suitable child inside the mansion. And indeed, the moment Auber saw Luina standing in the garden, he dropped to his knees in fascination. With shining eyes, he declared that she was a completely pure and untouched child. He continued describing her appearance, saying she looked exactly like a forest fairy. Luina stared at him with confusion and pointed at herself, asking if he really meant her. Auber quickly confirmed with great excitement that she was exactly the person he had been searching for. According to him, her appearance and posture were perfect for his work. Then he jumped up and began moving around with dramatic gestures, clearly inspired by what he saw. He looked around the garden and began praising everything, saying that even the temperature, the humidity, the atmosphere, and the fallen leaves on the ground were all perfect. He loudly declared that if this child became his model, he would be able to create any masterpiece he wished. Luina quietly walked closer to Seymour and asked him who that strange man was, while thinking to herself that he must be the famous rising painter Auber she had heard about. Seymour calmly placed his hand on Auber's head to stop his excitement and then spoke to Luina. He explained that he believed she might be suitable for a project he was currently working on and that he had come to ask for her help. He assured her that he would never force her to do anything she did not want to do. If she felt the task was too tiring or difficult, she could refuse without hesitation. However, he also promised that if she agreed to help him, he would grant any request she made in return. As Seymour looked at Luina, he quietly thought that his request must have sounded sudden. It would be completely natural for a child to refuse something like that. He wondered how he could possibly persuade her if she hesitated. But at that moment, Luina had already reached an important conclusion in her mind. She remembered reading about this exact situation in the novel from her previous life. This moment was connected to Seymour's failed business venture, which had been briefly mentioned in the story. That failure had begun when he was unable to find a child model for the project. From that point on, his business slowly began to collapse. He lost a large amount of investment money, his company started to struggle, and his personality gradually became colder and harsher. But Luina looked at the situation from a completely different perspective. If she managed to solve this problem for him, it meant she could get closer to obtaining the cure she needed. With a bright and cheerful smile, she immediately agreed without hesitation. Seymour looked surprised by how quickly she made her decision and asked if she had truly decided so fast. Luina simply smiled and said that she was happy to help him. She believed that if there was something she could do to assist him, then she should try her best to do it. Seymour thanked her for accepting, but he still insisted that she tell him what she wanted in return. He explained that he would feel much more comfortable if he could fulfill the promise he had made. Luina paused for a moment, thinking carefully, and then it seemed as if a new idea suddenly came to her mind. At that same time, Dante was secretly watching the scene from a distance. He wondered what his uncle could possibly be discussing with that girl in such a place. Suddenly, he heard Luina call out his name, which shocked him completely. With a friendly smile, Luina suggested to the Duke that Dante should become a model together with her. Dante was deeply shocked and wondered in disbelief what kind of strange idea this girl was talking about. The story then shifted to Dante's thoughts while he was riding in the carriage on his way back. He remembered that an entire year had passed since the last time he visited the Duke of Somerset's mansion. This time was different because it was the first time he had come to the palace without his parents. Even though the place itself had not changed, his feelings were completely different now. The reason for that change was the presence of that girl, Luina. He kept thinking about her strange request and wondered how she could expect him to become a model just because she asked him. Anger filled his mind as he rejected the idea completely. In his opinion, that girl had already gone too far. She had somehow managed to win the favor of his grandmother, who was famous for being extremely difficult to please. And now, his uncle was even planning to officially register her as part of the family. To Dante, it felt as if Luina had already been part of the family for a long time. Even the servants in the mansion treated her with kindness. A quiet fear began to grow inside his heart. He wondered if she might truly replace him one day, and if he would once again be abandoned, just as his nanny had once warned him. His mind drifted back to a memory from a year earlier. He remembered running after his nanny while she was leaving the house, begging her not to go. With tears in his eyes, he had asked why she was resigning, telling her that if she left too, he would be completely alone. But she had turned toward him with a cold expression and asked him if he knew why she had not left immediately after his parents died. When Dante answered that he believed she stayed because she was worried about him, she laughed at him cruelly. She said the reason was nothing like that. Instead, she revealed a harsh truth. She had only remained in the house to squeeze more money out of his uncle, the new Duke of Somerset. Those words shocked Dante so deeply that he could barely move. She told him that it was time he understood the truth, and warned him never to forget that people could abandon him at any moment. After saying that, she left him standing alone in the large hall. Before leaving, she added that no one cared about a child who had no money and no guardian. Since that day, Dante had been trapped by the fear that after losing his parents, if his uncle ever lost interest in him as well, he would be left completely alone. Because of that fear, he had decided that he must always complete any task his uncle gave him perfectly. Only then could he prove that he was useful. That was why, when his uncle summoned him to the office and asked for his help to become the face of the White Rose clothing line together with Luina, Dante saw it as a rare opportunity. Seymour had explained that the task might feel like a burden and that Dante was free to refuse if he wished. He had also suggested that Dante should meet Luina as part of the arrangement. But Dante immediately saw the chance to prove his worth. He believed this was his chance to show that the family truly needed him. Without hesitation, he agreed at once. He even begged his uncle to allow him to do it, promising that he would prove he deserved the position of heir. Seymour smiled slightly and thanked him, saying he was counting on him. Dante answered with pride and excitement. But now, after seeing how easily Luina gained everyone's affection, doubts began to appear in his mind. He wondered if he would be able to earn the same admiration. Sitting in the carriage, he took a deep breath and gathered his courage again. He decided not to worry too much. Instead, he would simply perform his task perfectly. Soon after, a servant announced the arrival of the young master. At the location of the photo shoot, the artist Auber was filled with excitement. He stood before Luina, who was holding a bouquet of flowers, and praised her enthusiastically, declaring that her performance was wonderful. When Luina noticed Dante arriving, she smiled brightly. Auber continued praising her lovely smile, clearly impressed by her presence. Luina waved at Dante warmly to greet him as he approached, accompanied by an assistant. When Dante saw how warmly she welcomed him, he quietly made a decision in his heart. No matter what happened, he would perform better than her. He needed to earn his uncle's satisfaction. The assistant informed Dante that he could change his clothes in the next room. At the same time, Luina cheerfully invited him to join them quickly. But Dante ignored her words and continued walking past her. For a brief moment, Luina's smile faded as she wondered if he still disliked her. However, she soon forced herself to stay optimistic. She believed the situation could still become an opportunity for them to grow closer, and there was still time for things to change. After Dante finished changing his clothes, the two children were brought together to stand side by side. Auber instructed them to stand close together under a single umbrella and act friendly. He encouraged them to pose in ways that made them appear closer, such as touching their cheeks together or holding hands. As he watched them, Auber spoke with great excitement, saying they looked incredibly cute together. The artist was almost overwhelmed with joy, announcing that this was exactly the image he had been searching for and that the sketch was flowing perfectly from his hand. After working for some time, the team finally called for a short break. Luina turned toward Dante and asked gently if he was feeling tired, but to her surprise, Dante had already disappeared from her side. The assistant informed her that young Master Dante had already gone ahead to the lobby. Luina thanked him politely before turning back. Just then, Auber walked over to her while holding one of his sketches. He showed it to her proudly and pointed out how beautifully and uniquely it had been drawn. Luina looked at it with curiosity and asked if it was really that good. As she examined the drawing closely, she noticed that Dante looked very impressive in the picture as well. That made her think of something. She asked Auber if she could take the drawing to show Dante. Auber agreed immediately without hesitation. Luina decided that this sketch might help her start a conversation with him and get a little closer to him. After all, earlier he had avoided even looking at her, which made it impossible for them to talk properly. She believed that if they discussed the drawing together, the mood between them might become a little better. While walking toward the lobby, Luina accidentally bumped into another girl. The collision made her stumble slightly, and she immediately apologized. But the other girl suddenly exploded with anger. She shouted in Luina's face and demanded to know what was wrong with her. The girl criticized her for being so small and not even watching where she was walking. Luina tried to apologize again and explained that she had simply been distracted. But the girl interrupted her rudely and asked if Luina even knew who she was. She insisted that Luina should have been paying attention to where she was going. Luina sighed quietly in her mind. She thought that she had simply been unlucky to meet the type of child she often saw in the orphanage. Those children liked to control others by raising their voices loudly. The girl continued shouting and demanded that Luina apologize properly. As the girl kept yelling, Luina suddenly smiled brightly. She had realized that dealing with people like this was actually very easy for her. She surprised the girl by cheerfully saying that she looked like a dog's paw. The girl froze with shock and confusion before asking angrily what Luina had just said. Luina calmly repeated the words. She knew from experience that the best way to deal with someone who gets angry for no reason was to smile and calmly return the insult. So once again, she said that the girl looked like a dog's paw. The girl trembled with rage after hearing those words. She repeated Luina's insult angrily and raised her hand, preparing to slap her. Realizing what was about to happen, Luina quickly shut her eyes tightly. But just before the girl's hand could reach her face, another hand suddenly grabbed it firmly. A strong voice asked the girl what she thought she was doing. When Luina slowly opened her eyes again, she was surprised to see that it was Dante who had stopped her. Dante looked at the girl and asked firmly if she truly intended to strike her. The girl answered with mocking arrogance and demanded to know who he thought he was. She said that even if she did hit Luina, what exactly could he do about it? According to her, Luina was the one who had started the argument in the first place. She shouted at Dante, saying that the matter was none of his business and that he should stay quiet and mind his own affairs. Watching this made Luina think to herself that the girl truly had a terrible temper. But Dante did not back down. He told her calmly that it did not matter who started the argument. Luina was present there as a model, and he asked if the girl was prepared to take responsibility if something went wrong during the photo shoot. He added that he was working alongside Luina as a model, so it was only natural that he would be concerned about her safety. Hearing this made Luina feel both surprised and happy. Dante was defending her. Just moments earlier, she believed he disliked her. But now a small hope appeared in her heart. Maybe he did not hate her as much as she thought. The angry girl screamed loudly and asked what his problem was. She demanded to know how long he had even been working there as a model. Then she suddenly began shouting for her father, declaring that she had not come here alone. Luina watched her behavior and quietly mocked it in her mind, thinking that calling an adult to solve the problem looked rather pathetic. Soon after, the girl's father arrived and rushed toward her anxiously, asking what had happened to his little princess. The girl immediately ran into his arms and complained that they were bullying her. Hearing this made the father furious. He demanded to know who had dared to treat his daughter that way. Then he rudely asked what families the two children belonged to, that made them behave with such arrogance. He ordered them to bring their parents immediately. In response, Luina simply looked at him innocently and explained that they did not have parents. The man looked confused for a moment as he studied them more closely. He noticed that their clothes carried brands he had never seen before, and that they did not appear particularly luxurious. From this, he quickly formed his own conclusion. In his mind, they were probably just two orphans being taken care of by some small and unimportant family. Feeling confident in his judgment, he continued speaking in an insulting tone. He declared that this was exactly why children who grew up without parents were hopeless. According to him, they clearly lacked proper upbringing. He warned them that if they continued behaving like this, they would eventually have to pay the price for their reckless actions. Suddenly, before he could finish speaking, a cold and firm voice interrupted him. The voice calmly completed his sentence by saying they would indeed pay the price for their reckless tongues. When everyone turned toward the direction of the voice, they saw Duke Seymour of Somerset standing there. Seymour looked at the man sharply and said that if he had heard correctly, the man had just insulted his niece and another child he personally cared about. The man froze in panic. He hurried to defend himself, saying he had only been trying to discipline the girl. At the same time, he asked in shock whether Luina was truly the Duke's niece. Seymour answered calmly but firmly, explaining that this situation actually made the matter even more serious. He then revealed that Luina was a child he had personally brought under his care to become his heir. He demanded to know how the man had dared to insult the name of the Somerset family. The man quickly bowed his head and apologized repeatedly, admitting that he had spoken out of ignorance and had made a terrible mistake. Just then, the artist Auber arrived, wondering what had caused all the noise and confusion. Seymour turned toward him and said that his timing was perfect because he had been about to leave anyway. He briefly explained that Luina and Dante had been insulted by those people, which shocked Ober greatly. Seymour then placed his hand gently on Dante's shoulder and told Ober that he had no desire to remain in the same place as those individuals any longer. If Ober wished to finish Luina's drawing, he would have to resolve the situation himself. After saying that, Seymour walked away. Later that day, the maid Aerie served Luina a slice of cake. She told her that she had heard about the frightening situation earlier and kindly offered her another piece if she wanted. Luina happily enjoyed the cake, while thinking to herself that if she received cake every time something like that happened, she would not mind facing such trouble again. Somewhere else in the mansion, Seymour was speaking quietly with Dante. He told him that he had heard how Dante defended Luina when she was insulted earlier. Then he gently patted the boy on the head, praising him for doing the right thing and saying he was glad Dante was there. Dante felt embarrassed by the praise. He quietly muttered that it had not been anything special and that he had simply done what he was supposed to do. Later, Luina returned to continue eating cake and noticed that Dante had arrived as well. She looked at him carefully and thought that he did not seem as cheerful as he had been earlier. While the maid placed another piece of cake in front of Luina, she noticed that Dante was not eating anything at all. Luina wondered quietly if Dante disliked cake. Trying to be friendly, she picked up a piece and offered it to him, telling him it was very delicious. But Dante rejected it coldly. He told her to keep it for herself instead. Luina felt disappointed when she heard his response. It seemed that he had returned to his usual distant and cold behavior. When Dante stood up and prepared to leave, Luina asked in surprise where he was going. He answered sharply that it was none of her business. His reaction confused Luina because just moments earlier, he had seemed to be in a much better mood. Later, Dante sat alone in his room with a book in his hands. He tried to read, but he could not concentrate at all. His thoughts kept returning to the moment when his uncle praised him earlier. The memory made him feel embarrassed because he had felt so happy over such a simple compliment. He scolded himself silently, telling himself that his reaction had been childish. After all, he had only done what was expected of him. At the same time, the painful memory of his nanny leaving him still remained clear in his mind. That memory strengthened his belief that he could not allow himself to behave like an ordinary child. Because of that, he decided he would not let his emotions control him. Instead, he would continue behaving calmly and obediently, just as he had always done. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted when the door opened and Luina entered the room while calling his name. Dante looked up in surprise and asked what she was doing there. Luina smiled and told him that she had guessed she would find him in this room. Then she explained that she had brought him some cake because he had not been able to eat dinner earlier due to what had happened. Even though she still remembered how he had refused earlier, Luina thought that he might secretly be hungry. That was why she had come all the way here with the cake. Dante looked at her with surprise and wondered if she had really come just for that reason. But he repeated his refusal once again. Luina did not give up. She insisted that he should at least try it because it was truly delicious. She continued trying to convince him to take just one small bite. Suddenly, Dante exploded with anger. He pushed the plate away and shouted loudly that he had already said no. Then he glared at her and said angrily that things like that were meant for children. If he was going to become the heir, he could not be treated like a child anymore. With bitterness in his voice, he added that it must be nice for her. He shouted that she could behave spoiled and throw little tantrums because everyone liked her. But he was completely different from her. He said that he could be thrown out at any moment. Luina remained calm and quietly asked him why he believed the Duke would abandon him. Her question surprised Dante. Luina gently reached out and wiped the tears from his face, assuring him softly that the Duke would never abandon him. Dante looked at her with confusion and asked how she could possibly know that. Luina answered with a confident smile. She said that she herself was proof of it. This answer only confused him more. So Luina explained clearly that she had joined the Somerset family for a specific reason. Her plan was to marry him one day and help him become the next Duke of Somerset. Those words shocked Dante deeply. He stared at her in disbelief and wondered if Luina was truly meant to become his future fiancée. Dante asked her directly if she had come to the mansion only to secure his position as the heir. Luina nodded and confirmed that this was indeed her plan. She also told him that his uncle already knew about it and had given his approval. Dante continued asking questions. He wondered why she was giving him the title when she could have tried to take it for herself. Luina knew that her real goal was not the title, but the cure for the Lily disease. However, she could not tell him that truth, so she simply answered that she had done it because she wanted to have a family. Her answer left Dante speechless. Luina admitted honestly that she had always been alone. All she had ever wished for was someone who truly needed her. With a sincere smile, she explained that she did not care about titles or inheritance. What she truly wanted was a family that would stand beside her. As Dante listened, he slowly realized something important. This girl, Luina, was actually very similar to him. She was also afraid of being alone. Luina apologized for suddenly telling him all of this. She admitted that she had not planned to speak about it today, and that it might sound too sudden and difficult to believe. But Dante surprised her by saying that he believed her. He said he truly believed what she said about wanting a family. Luina felt so happy that she could hardly contain herself. She quickly grabbed his hands and thanked him for trusting her. Then she leaned closer and told him something seriously. Since they were supposed to marry in the future, there was one strict rule between them. They must never betray each other. Dante looked at her seriously and asked if she truly intended to stand on his side. Luina nodded eagerly and confirmed that she was on his side. She added that he must also stand on her side because she needed him from now on and forever. Dante hesitated for a moment before asking her to promise that she would truly keep her word. Luina answered him with a wide smile and promised sincerely. Then she hooked her pinky finger with his and made a pinky promise. After that, they sealed it with a thumbprint like a secret agreement. Later, the two of them sat together in the kitchen while eating snacks. Dante asked her if this was the reason she had sneaked into the kitchen earlier. Luina laughed happily and confirmed that the food there was simply too delicious. Then Dante asked her to keep everything that happened that day a secret between the two of them. Luina agreed right away. When Dante noticed the basket full of cakes she was carrying, he asked if she planned to eat all of them herself. Luina shook her head and explained that the cakes were meant for someone else. She said she was on her way to deliver them to the Duke. Soon after that, she arrived at Seymour's office and placed the cakes on his desk like a special delivery. Seymour looked at her with a tired expression and pointed out that she was still awake at such a late hour. Luina explained that she had noticed he was working late again and insisted that he should at least eat a small snack. Then she reminded him that his bedtime was getting close. If he did not finish his work soon, she would be late reading his bedtime story to him. Seymour told her calmly that he was about to finish his work. He said she could come inside, sit down, wait for him, and eat the cake if she wanted. Hearing that made Luina very happy. Seymour then returned to his meeting and told his assistants to continue their discussion. He asked them to resume talking and wondered about the identity of the model they had mentioned earlier, Donna Devon. As Luina listened quietly, she suddenly realized they were talking about the same girl she had met earlier, the one she had secretly called the Dog's Paw Girl. Derrick explained that Miss Donna Devon had been chosen to become the face of the new brand created by the Mortier Company. He added that they had planned to keep this information secret. However, because of the incident that had happened earlier with Luina, the secret had now been exposed. Seymour then asked them what the name of this new brand was. Derrick answered that the brand was called Eden, and he explained that this was exactly where the real problem began. He said that although the Mortier Company was already a powerful and well-established name in the clothing industry, the concept of their new brand, their target audience, and even their chosen launch date all perfectly matched the direction of their own brand. Derrick spoke with worry in his voice. He said that since they were newcomers to the market, they would have almost no chance of winning against such a strong competitor. Because of that, he suggested that they postpone their launch date. But Seymour rejected the idea immediately. He said firmly that the contracts had already been signed and that delaying the launch now was completely impossible. Derrick then suggested another idea. He proposed changing the designs of their products, but Seymour rejected that suggestion as well. He explained that they did not have the budget to expand their marketing efforts. If they changed the designs now, it would mean throwing away their entire inventory. As Luina continued listening quietly, she slowly realized that this situation had become a very serious headache. She suddenly noticed that they had mentioned the name Eden. That name immediately made her uneasy. She remembered that this was the exact moment in the story where Seymour would face the true hero of the original novel. Luina recalled a scene from the novel when Seymour angrily confronted Valentine Mortier. In that scene, he accused Valentine of interfering with him at every step. Seymour had complained that nothing had gone right since the moment Eden appeared. Valentine Mortier was the head of the Mortier family, the long-standing rival of the Somerset family. But more importantly, he was the true male lead of the original novel, called The Withering White Lilies. In the novel, this event had only been mentioned briefly, but their fateful rivalry had truly begun with the creation of the Eden brand. Unlike Seymour, who had started his business from nothing, Valentine's Eden brand had been built on top of his already powerful fashion empire. Because of his experience in business and his unique designs, Valentine had eventually gained the favor of the emperor's consort. This had caused a huge sensation among noble ladies and young women. Because of that, in the original story, Seymour's new brand had been doomed to fail from the beginning. But Luina thought quietly that things were different this time. This time, she was here. As proof of that, she had already managed to secure a photo shoot with the famous artist Mr. Auber. But even as she thought that, she quickly realized it was still too early to relax. The photo shoot alone would not be enough. What Seymour needed was something strong enough to stop his brand from collapsing. Luina began thinking seriously. She told herself that she needed something much more powerful than just a photo. If she could not find a solution quickly, Seymour's business would fail again. He would fall into terrible debt and continue living like a workaholic who never rested. Even worse, if that happened, she would never receive the cure she needed. That was something she absolutely could not allow. While she was lost in deep thought, her attention was suddenly drawn away by loud shouting nearby. One of Auber's assistants was angrily scolding a young boy. The assistant accused the boy of touching one of the paintings inside the studio. The boy quickly defended himself, explaining that he had only wanted to look at it for a moment. But the assistant mocked him harshly and accused him of trying to steal the artwork. The boy strongly denied the accusation. Luina watched the scene quietly from a distance. She wondered why these adults were accusing someone without any proof. To her, their behavior looked childish and unfair. Because of that, she decided she should step in and help the boy who seemed to be in trouble. She walked toward the assistants and politely asked if they were Mr. Auber's assistants. Then she told them that Mr. Auber was extremely angry at the moment. The two assistants looked confused and immediately asked who she was. But Luina simply told them that they should hurry and go see him right away. Hearing that made the two assistants panic, and they quickly ran off to find Auber. As they rushed away, Luina quietly whispered an apology to Mr. Auber for involving him in the situation. After the assistants left, she turned toward the boy and gently asked him if he was all right. The boy gave her a shy thank you, his voice careful and unsure. He had already recognized her as the model who had just walked the stage. Because of that, Luina asked him whether he worked in the place. The boy explained that he was only a simple worker there, nothing special. As they spoke, Luina noticed a drawing lying on the ground nearby. She asked him quietly if the drawing belonged to him. When she bent down to pick it up, the boy quickly admitted that he had drawn it himself, though he tried to act as if it was nothing important. He even tried to hide the paper, clearly embarrassed. But Luina had already seen enough. Curious, she asked if he was a painter. The boy quickly denied it, his face turning red with embarrassment. Still, he admitted in a soft voice that becoming a painter was something he hoped to do someday. Hearing that made Luina's face brighten with sudden excitement. She told him that she believed she might actually be able to help him. At the same time, she explained that she had discovered a possible way to defeat Valentine's fashion brand. The boy looked at her with clear confusion, not understanding what she meant. Luina then lifted the drawing and asked him if he was the one who had drawn her in it. The boy confirmed that he had. He explained that he had made the sketch quickly during a short break. Luina studied the picture again and was honestly impressed by how good it was. The boy thanked her shyly when she praised his work, but as she looked more carefully at the drawing, something suddenly caught her attention. In the picture, among all the clothing details he had sketched, he had drawn her wearing pajamas. It was such a simple thing that she herself had never thought much about it, since she wore them every day. These pajamas, or more exactly the loose chemise dresses used as underclothes or nightgowns, would actually cause a huge stir in the fashion world a few years later. They would become very popular and stylish under a new name, the pajama dress. Fashion trends were already beginning to change. People were starting to grow tired of sparkling, shiny dresses and were slowly looking for something more natural and relaxed. Because of that, nothing could match the coming trend better than this simple idea. Since it was only a preview of a style that was already sure to become popular, Seymour's brand would not lose anything by trying it first. In fact, it could help him gain the image of being a natural and bold pioneer in fashion. At that moment, Luina realized this plan was perfect. She also noticed something else important. The boy had drawn this detailed sketch during a short break, which meant his hands worked very quickly. That kind of speed was rare for an artist. Luina then asked him what his name was. The boy answered shyly that his name was David. The moment she heard that name, Luina froze in shock. A sudden thought rushed through her mind. She finally understood the reason behind his incredible natural talent and his striking good looks. She felt sure that this was the same person who would one day appear in the art world like a bright comet. A few years in the future, the famous and handsome genius painter known as David Jena would become well known everywhere. She also remembered that he was famous for creating artworks only in black and white, which perfectly matched the idea she had just formed. After all, her dresses were mostly white, so colors were not really necessary. While Luina was lost in these thoughts, David noticed her silence and began to worry. He asked her nervously if she was all right. Luina quickly told him that she had simply been distracted for a moment. Inside her mind, she kept thinking how sad it would be for someone with such talent to work only as a simple laborer, not even as a painter's assistant. Even though she knew he would become famous someday, she still felt it would be a waste to leave his ability unused now. Because of that, she decided she would help him. She asked him again if he truly wanted to become a painter. David confirmed quietly that he did. Hearing that, Luina asked with excitement if he would accept the chance if someone offered him the opportunity. David answered with a sad smile, wondering who in the world would ever hire someone like him. Luina immediately replied with bright energy that she would be the one to hire him. She explained that since she planned to support him anyway, it would be better if she personally became the one to sponsor him. With a cheerful smile, she invited him to follow her. A little later, inside Seymour's office, Luina explained her full idea. She suggested promoting the chemise dress using black and white pamphlets designed with David's drawings. David listened nervously and agreed, though he quietly feared that the Duke might reject the plan. Derek, however, reacted very differently. He did not simply say the idea was good. Instead, he called it completely perfect. With excitement, he explained that such an idea would immediately attract attention and create a huge stir. Even if the pajama dress seemed a little bold, what truly mattered was grabbing people's attention first. For any new brand, the most important thing was getting its name firmly into people's minds, even if that meant surprising them enough to make them step inside the shop once. Derek continued enthusiastically that noble ladies who came to buy dresses would probably not hesitate to buy a nightgown as well. Because of that, the sales of chemise dresses were almost guaranteed. Derek became so excited that he suddenly lifted Luina up in the air, praising her loudly and calling her a true genius. Still smiling with excitement, he turned toward Duke Axel and asked what he thought about the plan. Axel listened carefully before answering in a calm voice. He admitted that the idea was indeed risky. However, he reminded everyone that they were already fighting a full battle in the fashion world. Because of that, he believed it was better to try something bold, even if the chance of success was small, rather than stand still and do nothing. Seymour thought about it for a moment before giving his approval. He ordered everyone to move forward with the plan immediately. Then he gave David a special responsibility. David would focus on creating the designs and preparing the pamphlets that would promote the new dress. Seymour also instructed that this new project should be officially added to the list of ventures sponsored by the Somerset Company. David agreed to the task right away, feeling both nervous and excited. From the very beginning, Seymour's new brand, White Rose, achieved a huge success. Ladies in high society soon began talking about the mysterious new dresses from White Rose. People started calling them the pajama dress. The pamphlets were the main reason the news spread so quickly across the city. Of course, not everyone reacted positively at first. Some conservative nobles whispered that the idea was embarrassing and even shameful. They questioned how something that looked like undergarments could possibly be worn in public. Yet those quiet complaints only helped spread the brand's name even further. The black and white drawings on the pamphlets made the girl in the picture appear gentle, innocent, and pure. People everywhere rushed to share their thoughts about the bold new idea of turning the chemise dress into everyday fashion. Because of all this attention, no other fashion house could compete with the noise and excitement that White Rose created. Naturally, this sudden popularity made the Mirror Company feel nervous and threatened. In response, they began publishing negative articles in newspapers, trying to damage White Rose's reputation. These articles accused the brand of facing repeated complaints about poor quality. When Axel asked Seymour how they should respond to these attacks, Seymour answered calmly, without showing worry. He simply ordered that an immediate quality inspection should be carried out. By carefully checking every product and answering the accusations directly, they proved that White Rose clothing was made with the highest level of quality. In the end, the rumors only made the brand stronger. The final push came when Countess Queensberry, a famous socialite known for making tea parties and outdoor picnics popular among noble ladies, appeared wearing the pajama dress during her private tea gatherings. The moment she did that, the chemise dress officially became the newest trend in high society. After that, its success became overwhelming. Since the launch of White Rose, Luina's days had been filled with happiness. Everywhere she went in the palace, the servants welcomed her warmly. Many of them looked forward to seeing her and loved to spoil the bright young lady with kindness. One afternoon, Luina visited a stationery shop with one of the palace maids. She was happily choosing colorful pens while chatting with the maid. Not far away, two girls stood watching her quietly. They whispered to each other, saying that it was really her. Luina noticed their whispering and wondered what they were talking about. Curious, she asked what was going on. The two girls suddenly rushed toward her with excitement. They told her that she was the girl from the advertisement pamphlet and said she looked even cuter in person. The maid quietly leaned closer to Luina and whispered that they had recognized her from the drawings. From that day forward, Luina received compliments almost everywhere she went. Even her relationship with Dante improved greatly. One day while she was studying, she admitted to him that there was a problem she could not understand. Dante kindly offered to help explain it to her. Because of that, they began studying together more often. Luina felt incredibly happy. She believed that if things continued this way, nothing would be able to upset the Duke anymore. If that happened, she might receive the treatment she needed much sooner. That meant her escape from the terrible fate waiting for her might not be far away. With hopeful thoughts in her heart, she walked toward the Duke's office. She imagined that he would be in a wonderful mood now. Perhaps he would thank her for everything she had done. Maybe he would even praise her, just like he often praised Axel and Derek. If that happened, she might receive the treatment immediately. But when she arrived, she noticed that the door to the office was slightly open. Curious, she carefully peeked inside. She expected to see him smiling happily. Instead, she was surprised to see that he had a guest with him. The moment she saw Seymour's face clearly, she felt shocked. He looked worse than before. Confusion quickly filled her mind as she wondered what could possibly have gone wrong. Instead of looking pleased with their success, his expression seemed even darker than the first time she had seen him. Panic slowly crept into her heart as she wondered what on earth had happened while she was away. Suddenly, Seymour spoke from inside the room. He calmly called her name and told her to come in, rather than standing outside the door. Luina realized immediately that she had already been noticed. When she stepped inside, the guest looked at her with curiosity and asked if she was the little girl everyone had been talking about. Axel answered that she was indeed the face of the White Rose brand. Luina politely introduced herself with a gentle smile and asked the man who he was. The man replied that his name was Jaden Dormer. The name sounded strangely familiar to her. Axel then explained that this gentleman was the vice president of their company. At that moment, Luina suddenly remembered something important. The man standing in front of her had appeared briefly in the novel The Withering White Lilies. In that story, he was known as the fraudster, who would eventually run away with the company's money. Luina quietly thought about the situation and began putting the pieces together in her mind. The vice president of the company was actually the very person who would steal the funds and disappear. From her point of view, it made perfect sense. His position gave him the best chance to take the money and escape without anyone noticing too quickly. As she realized this, she felt certain that this must be the reason the Duke looked so troubled and upset. Just then, Jaden politely asked for permission to leave the room. He said that since the young lady had arrived, it would be best if he returned later. Before leaving, he reminded the Duke to review the documents he had already submitted. Luina heard this and immediately began wondering about those papers. She guessed that they probably contained bad news, since they had come from someone she already believed to be a bad person. That must be why the Duke seemed so unhappy. Curiosity quickly filled her mind, and she felt a strong desire to know what was written inside those documents. When she tried to sneak a quick look at the papers, her eyes caught a familiar name written on them: Quentin Graham. The moment she saw it, her heart jumped in panic. She wondered if this was the name of the Duke's late brother. Confused and nervous, she tried to step a little closer so she could see the documents more clearly. But before she could move any further, Seymour stopped her firmly. He told her that those were not things meant for children to look at. Then he added that he did not have time to play with her today. Calmly but clearly, he asked her to come back later when it was bedtime. And just like that, Luina found herself being gently sent out of the office. Standing outside the door, she kept thinking about what she had seen. She was certain that something written in those papers was bothering the Duke deeply. But he had already told her to come back at bedtime. Because of that, she decided she had no choice but to use a different method. Without wasting time, she rushed straight into Dante's room. Her sudden entrance startled him. With bright excitement in her voice, she asked him if he was on her side. Dante looked surprised by such a sudden question. Still, he quickly assured her that of course he was on her side, but he could not help asking why she was suddenly bringing this up. Luina leaned closer and asked for his help. Later that night, Seymour sat alone in his office, quietly staring at the documents in front of him. His mind kept returning to the large amount of debt that Quentin owed to the Somerset Company. Quentin Graham had been his older brother, and also Dante's father. In truth, Quentin had always been a very kind man. Seymour remembered how his brother used to worry about him often. Quentin would tell him that he should relax sometimes and enjoy life instead of always focusing on work. He had always been gentle and warm, greeting Seymour with a smile even when Seymour spoke bluntly. Quentin had always supported whatever decisions Seymour made, although he often worried that Seymour might push himself too hard. But now Seymour could not stop wondering what kind of secret had been hiding behind that gentle smile. After Quentin passed away, the truth was revealed. A huge amount of debt had been left behind. For a long time, Quentin had been managing several companies. But when investors suddenly pulled out their money, one business after another began to collapse. In the end, when Quentin died, Seymour inherited not only the Graham title, but also the massive debt that came with it. As Seymour thought about it, he realized that a debt this large must have started building many years ago. He could not understand why his brother had never said anything until things had become so serious. Part of him wondered how the head of a family could allow things to reach such a terrible point. But then he immediately felt guilty for thinking that ways about someone who had already passed away. Seymour believed that somehow he could manage the debt. Still, another problem remained in his mind. He did not know how he would explain the situation to Dante. How could he tell the boy the truth about his father? With a heavy sigh, Seymour leaned back in his chair. On difficult days like this, his mind always drifted towards someone he missed deeply. His thoughts turned to memories of his late wife, Rose. Just then, his quiet thoughts were interrupted by Luina's voice calling out to him. She had arrived at his office because it was already bedtime. Seymour looked at her with surprise when she appeared. Holding a book in her hands, Luina smiled brightly and reminded him that bedtime had come. Seymour remembered the promise he had made to her earlier. Luina happily told him that she really wanted to read the fairy tale book she was holding. As Seymour walked out of the room with her, he casually warned her not to hide cakes and secretly eat them again. Hearing this made Luina realize that he had somehow discovered her little habit. Still, she quickly replied that she had not hidden any cakes today. Inside her mind, Luina laughed quietly and corrected herself, thinking that she had not meant cakes anyway. As they walked, the Duke reminded her to be careful while climbing the stairs. Meanwhile, back in his room, Dante sat quietly copying the documents. He could not help wondering in confusion why he had agreed to do this in the first place. The story moved back to 4 hours earlier, when Dante was still confused about Luina's strange request. She had just asked him if he would help her steal the documents from his uncle's office. Dante stared at her in disbelief, wondering if he had heard correctly. Luina nodded excitedly and confirmed that yes, that was exactly what she meant. She quickly explained that the task was not difficult at all. All he had to do was take the documents for a short time, copy them carefully, and then return them to the same place before anyone noticed. In her mind, she believed that even if they could not take the originals, accurate copies would still be enough. If they looked at the documents, they might find the reason the Duke had been so upset lately. They could even stop whatever bad plan that suspicious man was preparing. With hopeful eyes, she asked Dante again if he would help her. But Dante refused immediately. He told her that if she wanted to do something so reckless, she should do it herself, and not involve him at all. Luina froze in shock when she heard his answer. She had thought that they had become close enough that he would at least think about helping her. Meanwhile, Dante wondered briefly if he had spoken too harshly. But he quickly pushed that thought away, reminding himself that a mistake was still a mistake. He tried to explain calmly that she should not take it personally, and that she should not interfere in adult matters without thinking. Before he could say more, Luina suddenly dropped to the floor and started crying loudly. She threw herself down dramatically and begged him to help her. She shouted that she did not care what he said and that he had to do it for her. Dante panicked when he saw her lying on the floor like that. He asked her quickly to stand up, but she refused. Through her tears, she explained that he was good at writing quickly while her own handwriting was slow and messy. She insisted that the documents were only a few pages long and that they would not get caught. She kept begging him to help her. Dante tried to stay firm and told her that her tricks were childish and pointless, but Luina kept going. She reminded him that he had once said he was always on her side, and now he was abandoning her. She also added that the documents would make him curious too, since they might contain information about his own family. In the end, Dante sighed and gave up arguing. He agreed to help her, but only if she got up immediately. Hearing that made Luina jump to her feet with happiness. She told him that she had not seen all the details in the papers, but she had noticed one name written clearly. The name was Quentin Graham. Dante paused when he heard that. He asked her if she was sure she had seen his father's name written there. Luina nodded confidently and said she was certain. Dante felt confused by this. As far as he knew, his father had died suddenly in an accident and had not even left a will. Luina asked if he did not believe her. After hesitating for a moment, Dante said he would help her anyway. Luina smiled brightly and called him the best. Back in the present, Dante had already finished copying the documents. While working, he remembered how his uncle had scolded him earlier, and then made him sit through a long and boring fairy tale. Later, he quietly met Luina, while both of them hid under a cover. Dante told her that he had copied everything, and that the task had been easier than she expected. Luina began reading the copied pages. When she came across words she did not understand, Dante offered to read them for her. She happily told him to read them aloud. Dante then explained that the documents were mainly records about inheritance matters between family members connected to other families. In simple terms, the papers showed that Quentin had researched inheritance law 2 weeks before his death in the accident. The documents focused on how much of the Somerset family inheritance would go to Seymour and under what conditions those rights could not be claimed. At that time, their father, the former Duke of Somerset, had been seriously ill. Meanwhile, Quentin had been drowning in debt after several of his businesses failed. Because of this, Quentin's actions could be understood in two different ways. One possibility was that he wanted to know how much inheritance he would receive if the Duke died. The other possibility was that he was searching for a way to claim Seymour's inheritance for himself. When Luina realized this, she understood why the Duke had looked so troubled earlier. She remembered that in the original story, Seymour hated Quentin deeply, and even treated Dante coldly because he was Quentin's son. But right now their relationship did not seem that terrible yet. Luina wondered what had happened between them before the original story truly began, and thought that Seymour's deeper problems probably had not been solved until he met the heroine later. Luina looked again at the copied papers and felt more certain about her guess. These documents seemed to be the most likely reason for the Duke's dark mood. In her mind, it was obvious that Jaden had given those papers to Seymour on purpose. His goal was probably to plant doubt inside the family, separate them from each other, and slowly destroy the company. Luina quietly decided that she would not allow Jaden to succeed. No matter what happened, she would protect both the Duke and Dante. She turned to Dante and asked if those were all the documents he had copied. Dante nodded and said yes, that was everything. As she looked at him, Luina suddenly noticed that his face had grown darker. Only then did she realize what her actions might have done to him. By asking him to read the papers, she had basically told him that his father might have been planning something terrible. Regret filled her heart. If she had known what was written inside the papers, she would never have asked him for help. She wondered nervously what she should say now, but Dante calmly told her not to worry about him. He said that if his father had made a mistake, it was not something that deserved comfort. As Quentin's son, he believed he had the responsibility to face it as well. Luina felt touched by his words, but she quietly said that it must still hurt him. Dante replied that even if it hurt, if he became the family heir one day, his father's mistakes would become his responsibility too. Luina felt even more sorry for him. He was still only a child, yet he was thinking like an adult and carrying such heavy thoughts. She wished he would not pressure himself like that. Wanting to make him feel a little better, Luina decided to tell him something. She explained that the man who brought those documents to the Duke was actually a bad person. Because of that, there was a chance the documents could be fake. She admitted that they might also be real, but she did not want Dante to suffer too much because of them. She gave him a small smile as she said this. Dante then reminded her about the promise they had made earlier. They had agreed that from now on, they would always stay on the same side. Luina nodded and said yes, but she wondered why he suddenly mentioned it again. Dante gently held her hand and repeated that promise. Luina thought quietly that she hoped Dante was not hurting too much inside. After all, he was the first friend she had made since entering this strange story world. Because of that, she truly wanted to help him. She promised herself that she would find the truth for his sake as well. At the same time, Seymour was speaking with Jaden about the investigation he had been asked to do. Jaden calmly explained that the secretary's words had been correct. He confirmed that he had once served as Quentin's accompanying secretary. Because the situation seemed suspicious, he had conducted a careful investigation and brought the results to Seymour. When Seymour began reading the report, he was shocked by what he saw. Among the papers was a promissory note from the House of Horth. What surprised him most were the signatures written on it. The document carried the names of Quentin and Rose. Seymour stared at the paper in disbelief. He could not understand how Quentin could have borrowed money from Rose. Were the two of them really that close? As far as he knew, there had never been any dealings between them. Meanwhile, Jaden watched quietly and smiled to himself. His plan to confuse the Duke seemed to be working. The debt certificate clearly showed the signatures of Quentin and Rose, yet Seymour was certain they had never met privately. If that was true, Then the document suggested that Rose had secretly met his older brother without his knowledge. The situation looked even worse when Seymour noticed that the debt was not listed under Rose's personal name, but under the Horth family name. That meant the debt was treated as a family debt instead of a personal one. Because of that, it would not be easily discovered unless someone purposely investigated it. The more Seymour looked at the documents, the more troubled he became. Slowly, a painful thought entered his mind. It almost seemed as if Rose had been deceiving him. For an entire year, he had been so busy with work that he had not noticed anything strange. Even though the truth should have been discovered earlier, the whole situation felt absurd. Seymour could not believe that he had reached a point where he was doubting a possible relationship between his late wife and his older brother, both of whom were already dead. Finally, he said that such conclusions could not be made with only this amount of evidence. Seymour then ordered Jaden to make sure that his secretary kept silent and did not speak recklessly. Jaden agreed politely and said that if he found any new information, he would report it immediately. Before leaving, he also told Seymour not to worry too much. Outside the office, Jaden's deputy approached him and asked if he had finished speaking with the president. Jaden answered yes. The deputy wished him a safe trip. But after he walked away, Jaden quietly muttered to himself that Seymour was a fool. Jaden Dormer had once been an executive in a logistics company that was close to bankruptcy. After the Horth family later bought the company, Jaden's life seemed to change. His luck improved, and he slowly climbed higher in the company until he finally reached the position of vice president. From the outside, many people would say he had become a successful man. But the truth behind his life was very different. Jaden had a serious gambling addiction, and because of it, he was buried under huge debts. One day, his creditors chased him all the way to his house, demanding their money. With nowhere else to go, he decided to hide inside the company for a while. In his mind, the situation did not seem too bad. He believed he only needed to survive for a few more days. Even though he felt a little sorry for Seymour Somerset, he convinced himself that he had no other choice if he wanted to stay alive. In his thoughts, the company would soon belong to him anyway. Jaden had come up with this plan only a few months earlier, and he never expected everything to move so smoothly. Still, his debts continued to grow. He had even started gambling with company funds to cover his losses. One day, his secretary informed him that a new secretary had just arrived. Jaden told him to send the man inside. The newcomer introduced himself politely as Peter. After greeting him, Peter asked Jaden if the president often visited the salon nearby. Jaden answered that Seymour did visit there sometimes. Then Peter casually mentioned that someone he had served in the past used to hold secret meetings in that same place. Curious, Jaden asked about Peter's previous job. Peter replied that he had once worked as an accompanying secretary to Duke Quentin of the Somerset Ducal House. Hearing that immediately caught Jaden's attention. At that moment, he realized something important. This new secretary, who had joined by chance, actually knew secrets about the Somerset family. Jaden began thinking quickly. Family problems, private relationships, and love affairs were perfect tools to destroy someone's reputation. If Seymour's image became damaged, the company's leaders would likely remove him quickly. And if Seymour, who had already been mentally shaken since the accident, collapsed under the pressure, then it would be natural for the vice president to replace him. In Jaden's mind, that vice president was himself. He secretly believed his plan was working perfectly. Inside his thoughts, he mocked Seymour for being shaken by only a few documents. Even if Seymour felt slightly better after the success of White Rose, Jaden believed it was only a matter of time before family problems crushed him again. With a cruel smile, he almost encouraged Seymour in his mind to keep doubting his dead family members. Not long after, rumors began spreading quietly around the palace. People whispered that the president had been secretly meeting a married woman in Baileyport. Some said they had even seen him there more than once. A few people were confused by the story because Seymour did not seem like that kind of man. But others quickly added more details. They said the place where the meetings happened was the same private salon used by wealthy people for secret gatherings. Soon someone revealed the woman's name. They claimed it was Mrs. Winslet, the famous and beautiful actress who had married a powerful businessman 3 years earlier. the gossip spread quickly. Some people criticized Seymour, wondering how he could be seeing another woman only 1 year after his wife had died, especially when he had been known for loving her deeply. Others were shocked that he would choose an actress instead of a noble lady. The conversation grew louder as the rumors continued. Suddenly, Jaden stepped in and sharply asked what they were talking about. Inside his mind, he felt pleased. If the rumors kept spreading like this, Seymour's reputation among the executives would soon collapse. The people who had been gossiping panicked when they realized the vice president was standing there. Seeing their fear, Jaden decided to use the situation to his advantage. He calmly commented that the president certainly had good taste, but he should be more careful. Jaden added that if just a little more information leaked out at this stage, the rumors would soon become accepted as truth. Inside, he felt delighted by how quickly the gossip was spreading. After all, nothing traveled faster in a workplace than stories about the private life of the person in charge. Jaden realized he did not even need to push the rumors himself anymore. The employees would keep talking on their own. After enjoying the moment, he simply ordered everyone to return to their work. Just then, he suddenly heard a child's voice. It was Luina. She had appeared without anyone noticing. Looking at the women nearby, she asked them innocently if they also knew Mrs. Winslet. Jaden looked at her with confusion, wondering where this child had come from. Luina calmly explained that Mrs. Winslet was actually her teacher. She added happily that it was a good thing she had come today, because otherwise something terrible might have happened. She said she had insisted on taking a tour of the company and was shocked to hear such terrible rumors about the Duke being spread around. In her mind, Luina felt confident. Jaden had truly fallen into the trap today. As long as she was there, things would not go the way he wanted. The employees looked at the little girl in confusion, wondering who she was. One of the women suddenly remembered and said that she was Luina Whitfield, the model from the White Rose pamphlets. Another quickly added that she was also the child the Duke had recently adopted and planned to raise as his heir. Luina happily confirmed that both things were true. One of the ladies then asked her carefully if Mrs. Winslet was really her teacher. Luina nodded enthusiastically and said that the Duke had personally brought Mrs. Winslet to become her teacher. She described her as a wonderful and very beautiful person. When the women asked again if the Duke himself had arranged everything, Luina quickly shook her head and explained that someone else had recommended Mrs. Winslet first. She said that Mrs. Winslet had thought carefully about the matter after receiving the Duke's letter before finally agreeing to become her teacher. Luina continued talking excitedly, saying that the last time she wanted to see the downtown area, the Duke had suggested going somewhere quiet because too many people might recognize Mrs. Winslet and make her tired. Unfortunately, the Duke had been too busy with work that day, so she had gone with his nephew Dante instead. The ladies looked at each other in surprise. What Luina described sounded completely different from the rumors they had been hearing. They began wondering how those strange stories had started in the first place. After thinking about it, they agreed that it made no sense for the Duke to hold secret meetings while bringing a child along with him. At that moment, Jaden stepped closer to Luina and spoke sharply. He asked her what she thought she was doing. He said that anything beyond that point was a private matter for the Somerset family. Jaden added that continuing the conversation could put the Duke in a difficult position. He also pointed out that even if she was the model for the company's brand, she could not simply enter the company and act freely. Inside his mind, Jaden was growing nervous. If he did not stop her quickly, his carefully planned scheme might collapse. After everything had gone so well, he could not allow this child to ruin it. With that thought, he told her firmly to leave. Then he turned to the employees and told everyone to return inside because the office had become too noisy. Luina looked at him carefully and realized what he was doing. He was clearly trying to damage the Duke's reputation on purpose. Even though she had corrected the rumors, he still wanted to push her away. Luina decided that she would not leave so quietly. Suddenly, she surprised him by saying that she had an important message for him. Jaden blinked in surprise and asked if the message was really for him. Luina nodded and calmly explained that some people outside were looking for him. She added that they looked very angry and were shouting his name loudly. According to her, they were accusing him of being a rascal who refused to even pay interest on his debts. She also said that the men looked very scary. Hearing this made Jaden freeze in shock. He quickly tried to deny the accusation, but Luina interrupted him and insisted that she had clearly heard them calling his name. The women nearby began whispering in surprise. They wondered if debt collectors had really come all the way to the company building. Slowly, their opinion of the vice president began to change. Some of them quietly said that they had never expected him to be that kind of person. Jaden suddenly realized that the situation was slipping out of his control. Luina took advantage of the moment and urged him to hurry outside and meet the people waiting for him. She pointed out that they were still there calling his name. Jaden trembled with anger, but the more he tried to speak, the weaker his words sounded. Luina watched him calmly and thought to herself that no one would believe a man who could not even argue against the words of a little girl. Confusion spread across Jaden's face as he hurried away. After he left, the women looked at each other again. They began wondering if his earlier accusations had only been empty rumors. Many of them agreed that a child would not lie about something like that. Because of this, they started doubting everything Jaden had said. Since her mission was complete, Luina decided it was time to find the Duke. She happily walked through the building, wondering where he might be. Soon she spotted him walking down the hallway with his assistant Axel. She quickly called his name and ran toward him. Seymour looked surprised and asked why she'd come all the way to the company. Luina politely explained that she wanted to thank him for personally choosing her teacher. She bowed respectfully, while thanking him. Axel watched this and seemed impressed by her manners. Seymour commented that she could have done that later at the palace after work. Still, he gently patted her head and said that she had gone through a lot of trouble to come here. Luina smiled and told him that thanking him was not the only reason she had come. As she looked at him closely, she noticed that his face and skin looked worse than before. Seymour then told Axel to prepare some refreshments in an empty room. Luina wondered quietly if Jaden had already caused trouble earlier. Seymour invited her to come with him and promised that he would have some cakes prepared for her. Luina's eyes brightened with joy when she heard that. She decided it was better to eat first and think about everything else later. While she happily ate the cake, Seymour asked if it tasted good. Luina answered enthusiastically with her mouth full that it was very delicious. In her mind, she thought that this was a perfect energy-boosting cake. At times like this, she felt she should stay close to the Duke even more.